Well, I'm Paul Hefner, the owner of Finance Balls, and today I'm talking about increasing your profits, and particularly looking at your margins. Got a blog post that I wrote here that I will share. There we go. So this is all talking about this is a good chart. So it shows different service levels. One's for agreement, one's for bid type of work. Shows them the trend, so you can see the growth sort of going down. There's other things going on in certain months. Um, and this is sort of the phase one is, can you get some data like this to understand the trends? And then the second piece, which we'll get into, is how to improve those. So let me get into it a little bit. So I see this a lot for companies that have been around a while. They do a really good job. They have some money coming in, and especially now, sort of in 2023, and I'm sure there's other periods throughout history where there've been a boom period, and then you sort of go into a recession or into a slower period, and all of these profits sort of shrink or stall out. I wrote a post earlier about sort of inflation and people wanting and staff wanting more money and not being able to raise pricing anymore, and all those things are sort of contributing to this. So I think this is what we're going to focus on now, is looking at the margins. There's also things you can do outside of that, looking at your fixed costs, looking at scaling up and doing that. And I wrote a blog post that you can link to here if you go to our Finance Pals website. So when you're talking about margins, I think the first thing that a lot of companies run into is being able to understand the service line profitability. So they have over the years set up their chart of accounts in a way where it just made sense. Maybe they have all of their sale. I think it's people get more sophisticated than just having all of their sales listed as sales. Which is where a lot of companies start out. Sort of day one, and just QuickBooks sets you up that way, and it says, do you want to code this to sales? And you say sure, and then that works. And then eventually you break it up and say, oh, I want to see how for us, how bookkeeping is doing versus tax. And you can start separating it that way. And sometimes people have it based on sales through different channels. So if it's through Square, it's this line. If it's through invoices, it's this line. And so they sort of just go by how it's sort of done operationally. And then on the cost side, it's even trickier. Um, they may have a certain staff or person that's working on all the service lines. Um, and even us as a company, we have tax people that do bookkeeping work, and vice versa. So it gets a little confusing when you're trying to separate out those labor costs into different things, or even just materials costs. We've worked with meat processors and things, and so they might be buying an animal, and they're going to split it up into all the different products, from jerky to hamburgers to different things, and so all those things make it really hard to sort of say, okay, when we look at bookkeeping, or we look at a certain revenue account, knowing what the costs associated with that are, and then what the profitability is, to then say, okay, well, like for us, we can say, CFO has, this margin, and bookkeeping has this margin, and we can start to say, okay, if we were just to strategically focus on, improving our margins, we might say, okay, we want to do more CFO work, or even going further, we might say, are there things that we need to do with our bookkeeping to improve our margins, because maybe they've gotten smaller, or all those things. So anyway, so I'm going off on a bunch of tangents, but the first part is sort of, trying to get these things to line up so you can do that type of analysis. And if you don't have good data, it's sort of going to be garbage in, garbage out scenario, sort of like I was talking about, with either your revenue not being segmented with how the money's coming in, because you might just be getting the deposits and not know what revenue it is. You can sometimes what we'll do is we'll do an end of month adjustment. So if all of your data is through a point of sale system, we can do analysis for that month's sales and say, okay, like if you were a coffee shop, you would say, this amount was black coffee, and this amount was lattes, and this amount was Americanos. I don't know the different types of coffees, but all the different types. And then you can sort of do an adjustment and then break up the revenue that was all just deposits from Square or whatever the point of sale system is, and then break it out that way. So you can look at some of those ways to do it where you don't have to necessarily do it every transaction, which you can do as well, but that's a lot more work. But yeah, so start trying to figure out how you can do that. And then ultimately what you may decide is like, okay, well, that's all perfect. But I don't really want to spend this amount of work every week or every month, sort of updating our QuickBooks to show our service lines, from a revenue and a cost standpoint, and we're sort of making a bunch of assumptions. And it's sort of in this garbage in, garbage out. So then you say, okay, well, if we were just going to do it for the full year for, all of 2022, or maybe, we're sitting in July right now of 2023. So you would say, okay, for the first half of the year, let's look at all the data and just do an analysis that's in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever um, um, tool you like to use, and really dive into what those margins are for each of those things. And maybe you have to make assumptions like, this person's time is split 30% between these different um, you know, uh, I guess cost of goods sold categories. Or you do something where you maybe follow that person around for a week, or have them do a timesheet for a week, or you do something where you get the data point. You're not going to have them do it for indefinitely, but you have them get the data point, and then you do this analysis to say, okay, here's sort of where we are right now for the different service lines, and this is what our profitability is, and then you can start to, if you do this once a year or something, then you can start to see the trends. And then if nothing else, you can, at least if you only do it once, you can start to say, well, it looks like there's some opportunity here, or this service line. I think it's really easy to get into I don't know, a mindset where you sort of think the margins. You're like, well, we I don't know, hire somebody at $50 an hour, and we charge them out $100 an hour, so our margin should be we should be making 50% margin. And then when you run the numbers, you forget about admin time, and you forget about I don't know, discounts that you give customers, and you forget fixed fee customers where it doesn't apply, and all these different things. And then so you can start to understand that your sort of theoretical margin isn't a real margin, and then you can start to sort of close that gap. So again, another tangent, sorry about that, but I guess where I was getting to is, what's the data telling me? So what's the trend? Are there certain things you can see in terms of number of customers, or price per customer? Is there sort of a second level of data that you're looking at? Are there certain service lines that have smaller profits? All those types of things will start to just by knowing the data, because I think sometimes people run the business in a way where they're trying to serve all customers, and they're trying to just to increase the revenue, and that works to a point, like I talked earlier about, or I didn't, but in an earlier post about scale and overcoming your fixed costs. But as you refine these things more, when I talk later about getting rid of your bad customers and things like that, there's all different things you can start to look for, and you can start to strategize around. So it's a little complicated, but hopefully just by tracking, start to say, okay, well, this is lower than I thought. What can we do to improve it? Here's an example, two examples I listed off here. I had one customer that was switching the owner was switching their role from sort of a revenue producing role to more of a business development, sort of working on the business. And longer term, this is a great strategy, and it goes along with Michael Gerber's E-Myth, which says work on the business, not in the business. And I think it was the really great long-term strategy. But when I was looking at the trends and the numbers, their margins and the profit, took a huge hit. You can think, if you take somebody who is, maybe bringing in a few $100,000 of revenue, and then instead they're, just having a few $100,000 of cost without the revenue, that's a huge change for a business. And I think, they'd underestimated a little bit of what that was going to cost to do that, or how long it would take. Then ultimately, they train up junior staff, and then the business sort of runs itself, and you get on it's sort of the flywheel, and the customer or business development helps get new customers, and all that is really good long term. But in a short term, um, it wasn't it didn't help their profitability, let's say. And then another one was somebody who just, this one was it was easier. They were invoicing their customers less frequently. Um, I think it's a, to save on admin cost, and to um, I don't know, just to maybe make it easier on their customers. And as they did that, the sort of metrics around number of customers per month, or the um, uh, I guess revenue per customer went up, but that the metrics just looked like their business was doing more poorly, and did have a cash flow impact of sort of spreading these costs out. And it still might be the right thing to do from a customer standpoint, but there's as a cost for it, and then they can obviously make a change to change it back. So I think the main piece of this is trying to figure out if you can get the data to sort of track your service lines, and then you start to look for ways to improve it. I've written a bunch of articles. I mentioned sort of scale, so a bigger scale to cover your fixed costs. Wrote an article on KPIs and goals. So after you say, our uh, margin is going down, you need to some sort of thing to look at, revenue per customer, or you look at your operations costs per customer, or whatever it is, to start to say, okay, if we improve these metrics, then that will improve the profitability of that service line. Or it could even be, can we do more of, more CFO work and less bookkeeping, or whatever it is, to start to track those goals and have different initiatives. I mentioned it a few times, but getting rid of bad customers, there's a blog link on that. And I think this one's more around just freeing up your team's capacity to work on more profitable customers. It makes sales easier if you have sort of staff available and ready to fit into the roles, and it just frees up your sort of mental I don't know what I would even call it, thought power to solve other issues, or to help other customers, if you're not just putting out constant fires or chasing customers to pay or things like that. So lots of other ways to start to improve. But I think, yeah, oh yeah, and I mentioned here that the sometimes the best place to start is just start by talking to the sales and operations teams. They may have things they're hearing from their customers around pricing, and maybe they're lowering pricing to try to get more sales. And then the operations team may be having bottlenecks, or process things that are hard, or change, or we call it custom orders from the sales team, and all these different things ultimately can impact your profit. So if you start to uncover what these bottlenecks are, and then make improvements, strategic improvements to operate more efficiently, then that should drive better profits. So thanks for watching, and I'm going to end it here.